Hello and welcome back to this SlimDevOps Live episode 9. Hello again, Peter. How you doing?
Hey, Martin, how are you?
Yeah, very well. So this was originally recorded live on twitch.tv/SlimDevOps on the 5th of August. And if you're watching this on YouTube, then you can follow us over on Twitch to see the live versions of these and join in with the rest of the community. So this evening, as I switch over to the, I say this evening, today, this episode, we've got new surroundings for me. Yeah.
Exciting. Where are you, Martin?
I am in a location called Desk Lodge, not far from where I live, which is a co-working space. And due to the uncomfortable temperature, I have retaken up residency here because they have air conditioning and my office at home does not. So yeah, I moved in this week. So this is my little space here.
You got your whole streaming set up there.
Yes, and I'm breaking the cardinal rule of streaming this over Wi-Fi. I think I might have broken rules 2, 3, and 4 as well because I updated OBS before we started, and I haven't done a test stream using this setup. So it's fine. It's fine. I rsynced my configuration from the machine at home, so it's obviously going to work.
I'm kind of in the same boat. I was in a vacation in the beach house the last time we streamed, and not my entire setup did not make it back to my home office here in Massachusetts. So I'm not going to touch my microphone because I'm terrified I'm going to tip it over. But if you hear a lot of bang noise on the audio, that's me knocking my mic over. So, but that's the way it is. So all good. We'll make it through.
So I'd just like to say welcome back to Yannick, that's French CH, and Ali, and also Big Pod and Bashful Robot, which is Dustin. Hello, Dustin. Welcome. Good to see you here. So hard to see someone in an office. Yeah, actual office. I'm the only one here. I've got literally the whole building to myself at this hour as it is here. Anyway, so we've got a little bit of housekeeping. The first is we're recording this with Peter and I between summer vacations. So Peter was away last week. I'm going to be away next week. So there'll be no stream next week. But we have got some other stuff up and coming, which we would like you to mark your calendars for. Is that right?
Yep, exactly right. So yeah, we've got a good August planned, I think. A good friend of our Slim.AI family, Brendan O'Leary, who is from GitLab. He's a senior developer advocate there, and I'm guessing a lot of people have seen him on streams and stuff before. He presents at DockerCon and these other places. So he's really great. He's on the CNCF advisory board, and he just knows a ton about everything related to containers and software development, and obviously CI/CD pipelines and that kind of stuff. So he's going to be joining us August 19th. And Martin, you're going to be interviewing him, right?
That's
what are
right.
you guys going to talk about?
We're going to be talking about developer experience and the software supply chain and community development and, well, all of those things that they all sort of come together. But yes, Brendan's got a load of experience in these areas. It'll be a fascinating conversation. So mark your calendars and bring your questions, because this is a rare opportunity to, get some real insight from somebody that's been sort of fundamental in the success of GitLab and their community program. So, if you want to find out more about what's been going on at GitLab and what's coming up soon, then join us for that one.
Cool. And yeah, and then hey, we know these people. So I thought it was really cool the last time we met up with everybody here, and there were some good requests for like kind of a containers 101. It seems like a lot of the stuff that we're doing around kind of getting people started, we have a lot of people who are pretty experienced developers but haven't worked a ton with containers and want to learn more about it. So we're going to do that the following week, and so we're getting a few extra weeks there to tee that up and make sure that's a good learning experience for everybody. Like we said last time, it'll help if people have apps that they can bring, and we'll talk about containers, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the show in the next segment. But I think that'll be a really cool experience. It'll be interesting for me because, I'm still also kind of new to this stuff. And so, Martin and I will lead you through that and probably get some help from some of the engineering folks and container experts that we have here at Slim.AI. We'll see if anybody else joins us. We'll make that kind of a little mini hackathon. And that'll be the week of August 26th. And then Martin, you were thinking about maybe extending this bring your own app idea.
That's right.
A little bit more, right?
Yeah, so maybe even before August the 26th as well. I was talking to Yannick earlier, who's in chat with us now, and he sort of posed this idea of, well, what if I was to bring a simple application along, take me through the, starting at rung 1 on the ladder and actually turning my app into a container. And I said, yes, I'd totally do that. And I would encourage others of you. I know Big Pod, you've been experimenting with .NET, and Dustin, you must have some interesting stuff up your sleeve to experiment with. If you want to, get your hands dirty and, experience it for real, then I'm quite happy to stand up ad hoc streams in a time that suits your particular location. And we'll just go through some stuff, and it'll be casual, no script, just you bring your app and we'll figure it out together and, get a few people started.
Yeah. And for someone like, I know Ali's here with us, and he's been posting over in the Slim.AI Discord some of his recent projects, which are all pretty cool. I wish I had more feedback for him. I think he's, he's like the one who does the homework in advance of the the class starting or something. So I think for people who have more experience or have more robust apps, hopefully we can do some content there, but also encourage you to join and help people. I think you've got a lot of great experience, and there are some other people who have a lot of container experience on the stream, so I'd love to get that feedback as well. So.
Indeed.
Cool. So yeah, I think it's a nice segue into kind of what we were hoping to talk about today. And I think it comes up a bit, and it ties into a little bit of what we're doing with the Slim.AI product as well. But I thought it would be an interesting discussion. I think a question that we got from a lot of you in the stream last time was sort of okay, where do I start? I'm a developer, and I know I had this experience myself where, okay, I know Python pretty well, and I'm going to I'll just go do the Python one. I develop in Flask. Do I get the Flask container when I want to go Dockerize that? Do I start with something like Debian? And how do I kind of think through that starting point process? And it really is an important thing that you need to think about in terms of where you're starting, which container you're starting with, and that's going to be very specific to your projects. This is the way I think about it, and I think it's a useful framework, which is, so what we're talking about is which container you're going to use in kind of that from statement when you start building your Docker file, right? Or what are you going to pull when you go to make your Docker pull command? And if you're working in a microservices environment, this is going to change for you a little bit, where you start. So
right.
On the left side of this graph, right, we've got sort of the less specific, more like base OS images, and that's where you'll see them categorized. I think Martin's going to walk through how you'd find these in DockerHub. But, I know this community is very familiar with the Ubuntu image, and you probably ask, why would you ever use anything other than Ubuntu? And I'll let Martin sound off on that in a minute. But, there's Debian and Alpine Linux and that, and that's a good starting point. But the thing you need to know if you're going to start there is that you're going to end up installing sort of, all of the core programs, all of the kind of app dependencies in addition to your application when you go to install that, right? So you need to know to make those updates, and even especially with something like Alpine, you want to make the security updates in your Docker file. If you move to the right of the spectrum a little bit, you might be starting with sort of like the Python or the Node image, say you're a React developer, or you're doing Vue.js or something. That's what I've been doing recently. Yannick says there are other OSs. Yeah, we'll start that war. We've already done the Python and R war in here, so now let's start the Ubuntu versus.
Yeah, let's have a distro flame war. Why not?
but yeah, so the language specific containers, generally they have, like the Ubuntu and Debian image, they have big communities behind them. And they do make good starting points. Again, you're going to end up sort of installing the dependencies that you need for your application in those. But, in the Python experience, right, you're probably going to have pip installed already in that image. You're going to have some of the Python tools available to you that, most Python developers would expect. And so those make good starting points, but they might kind of give you some things that you might not need if you're not using them all the time. I know the Python image has image magic in it, which is a pretty big file and not everybody uses it. The other use case is kind of when you're way over on the right hand of the spectrum and you actually are just using a container to do something, right? So the case here would be something like Grafana, right? That's going to, do your metrics and your observability for you. You're just running that as a microservice to look at your other microservices probably, right? So you might just be able to pull that image and you don't even have to do very much to it. You might have to change some configuration. You might have to, add some app stuff or some customizations to it. But, in something like the TensorFlow, you're just going to add your model to it. The Minecraft game servers, we talked about that last time, you're just going to basically run that and hopefully it runs and you figure it out. Some of the home server stuff like that Linux server IO puts out is similar to that. So this is kind of a good framework for thinking about these images, which image you start with. And where you want to make that starting point. If you don't know where, start with your favorite OS, right, Martin? So
so we've got a few people in the chat who have made containers before. I'd be interested to hear from them. When you're putting your application in a container, you're just setting out, what do you choose? Do you choose an OS base image or do you choose a framework specific or language specific? And I'm just going to dig into this a bit, but I was just going to sort of touch on that last point where you're looking at things that are highly specific at the end. You can think of those containers as basically apps. You want these sort of large scale building blocks to either run a particular platform or service on your estate or in your home, or you want to connect them together to build out infrastructure. That's what you're doing at that end. And in the first two instances, you're creating an app, that you're inserting into your, selection of building blocks. So I see that Big Pod said, they generally choose Ubuntu or in specific cases, Alpine. And Dustin says they usually start with Alpine. So let's, and then Ali says, I choose the OS I'm developing on. Though that's a wise place to start, and I'll dig into that in just a little moment. And then Dustin says he's been looking at more specific container images. Okay, so let's just take a look. If we flip over here to
joke there, the meme, Docker lets you deploy your dev environment into production.
Well, it's true. It's true. So what we're looking at here is this is DockerHub, and we've currently got this filtered by just bringing up my window here so I can drive this. We're currently looking at base images. You can see I've got this toggle on here, base images, and this is ordered by popularity, and we'll come back to this one in just a moment because it's an interesting case, because this technically is the most popular base image on DockerHub, and you'll notice it hasn't been updated in 2 years. So that's an interesting case. But then we see there's Alpine here in second place, and then Ubuntu in third place. And it says 10 plus million here, but when you click through, what you'll find is actually over 1 billion. It would be interesting to know how many billions are actually being deployed, but it gives you some insight there. Now, when we're looking at these OSs, let's just take Alpine and Ubuntu, and BusyBox is here as well. They're all next to each other, so this is a good starting point. And you can insert name of favorite distro, and you will find a base image. Amazon Linux have them, Red Hat have them, and we mentioned Debian. So these smaller images may be unfamiliar to you. If you are familiar with Ubuntu or Red Hat or Fedora or SUSE, then starting with Alpine is a very different beast. It's purpose built to be small, to take up as little space as possible, so that you build out your application on top. And that sounds desirable because it comes in at the low price of maybe 5 megabytes, and I think BusyBox starts at 1 megabyte, which is attractive. However, the question is do did you want to become a Linux distro maintainer? Because now you are literally starting with nothing and you have to build out the operating system and all of the dependencies that your application requires in order to get a functioning app. And that in itself can be challenging because the package installer is not as convenient and helpful as things like apt and RPM on, Debian and Red Hat based distributions. And Ali made the point that, they start their containers from the OS they're developing on. And that's wise because that means, you've got much less work to do. You already understand what the runtime requirements for your application are from your, dev image. Now, something else to consider, you can see this was updated 43 minutes ago, and this was updated 43 minutes ago, and this was updated 43 minutes ago. I'm going to guess that a CVE has just come out of embargo and all of these images have just been respun with the appropriate security patches included. And there's Debian at 42 minutes and CentOS. This is interesting stuff, right? So one of the things you need to consider is, what's the security release cadence and commitment from the vendor of the base image that you're starting with. And as we can see, there's some strong contenders here who are obviously staying up to date. I have some insight into how Ubuntu does things, but traditionally Ubuntu and Red Hat are very strong in this area with releasing images that are respun with security fixes very quickly. One of the other impacts of using something like Alpine, and more so BusyBox, is where you're using something with an alternative libc implementation. And what you may run into there is that you find that your application is incurring a performance penalty that you haven't observed when you were using a general purpose distro as a base image. So some of the languages and frameworks, some of their base images are built on top of Alpine. So that's kind of abstracted away that it is based on Alpine. But you need to be aware of this, because if you're suddenly seeing a significant performance impact, you need to be aware of the fact that it's using muscle under the hood rather than libc for size benefits. But that can come at the impact of performance, so you need to weigh that up. So yeah, that's kind of like the meat and potatoes of looking at base images in terms of distros and operating systems, and what some of the pros and cons are, and things that you should consider when you're making your initial selection. I'd be interested to know if anyone's got any other thoughts and feedback on things that they consider when they're picking their starting point.
Yeah, Bashful Robot mentioned looking at some other distros like Flatcar, which I don't have too much experience with. Bashful Robot, maybe we can look into the use cases there, but curious how you're using that. And then Big Pod was saying that he's actually kind of switching back and forth between images as he's doing his multi-stage builds, which is something we touched on I think 2 streams ago, where we talked about sort of the different advanced techniques for slimming containers. In multi-stage builds, you're going to use an image to kind of build sort of the development image or the actual image, and then you're going to rebuild that image again from scratch or from a base image to make it smaller and just add that last layer on top of that image. So that's an interesting approach. I haven't seen going back to the programming language in the second stage of the build before. Usually the tutorials kind of show starting from the scratch image or the Alpine image in the second phase. So that's an interesting approach, BitPod.
Yeah. And that sort of takes us on to, well, you can start with these base OS images, but then there is a separate category which is sort of frameworks and languages. And so we thought we'd sort of show this for those of you that have not seen it before. This is the Slim Developer Platform. If you've not tried it out, you'll find the invite URL at the bottom. I believe there are still a few invite codes to be snapped up, so click on that link and sign up whilst there are still some available, while stocks last. But Peter, we've got some categorized sort of curated selection here. What's all this about, and what was the thinking behind it?
Yeah, so our goal was, I mean, we were looking at DockerHub before, and that's obviously a good starting point and probably the most common starting point for most people in their container journeys. I think one thing that we noticed about sort of DockerHub, and we wanted to add a little more nuance to it, was the filters are pretty good on DockerHub, but usually it goes by most popular image. And there are a lot of like sort of images that are not quite as popular, but that still have really, really good applications, either for, developing on your local machine, a category around DevOps and infrastructure. Obviously, there's a lot of containers around metrics and observability, and we just wanted to make those things kind of easier to find. And then, we went through with some of our container experts in Slim.AI and talked to some other people in our community to really like round out this list of like, okay, these are the containers that people are using, not just the ones that are the most downloaded, but the ones that are sort of most critical to development or interesting in a microservices environment. And then, there's also some like emergent programming languages and technologies, Julia and Swift come to mind, that they might not be the most popular because they're pretty specialized, but they actually really work well in a containerized environment. So those are the types of ones that we have on the list. Here you see the Julia image. So we wanted to kind of make it easy for people to kind of browse and find a curated list of containers. So curious how people think that we did. Yeah, Dustin, I don't know if we have Flatcar in here. I want to look into that one a bit more, but curious, what people think about these categories and lists. We're going to try to refine this over time and obviously put some machine learning against it. And as people start interacting with these categories here, the list will get better and we'll create more collections and recommendations. But we were also thinking for Container 101, if people are going to join us on that journey, this is a pretty good starting point for people to come in and find a container that they think is interesting to them. Maybe they can pull it to their local environment using the Docker pull command, and even try to maybe build a Docker file using that image and see if we can use that as a starting point for this bring your own app concept that we're going to do. So, oh, cool. I'm going to click on this link that Bashful Robot just sent over. But yeah, so that was sort of the thinking behind these categories. And the idea is like, you can build your whole app out of Docker containers. That's kind of the modern development environment. So this is a good starting point for starting to create those blueprints, and eventually we'll be building out this collections functionality so you can collect a bunch of them together, and that will basically be your app.
Yeah. And one of the advantages that I see here is if we take Yannick as an example, who is very much sort of starting their container journey, you'll find navigating this curated list of containers much less intimidating because we've already done the work to constrain it down to the popular things that are from the official publishers. So you should be able to find a lot of good quality stuff here without having to trawl through the millions and millions of things that exist in DockerHub, some of which may be duplicate. Like, for example, I said we'd come back to this and I forgot at the time, but if we look at this open JDK at the top here, that is the single most popular base image on DockerHub. And that one hasn't been updated for 2 years. And that's because there was a licensing change for that particular version of JDK in 2019. And there are now different versions, different published versions of that container. But if you've got that integrated in your CI/CD somewhere, well, you're going to continue to be building on this thing that isn't being updated or changed. So, that's something else to be mindful of when you're picking your images. Are you actually picking, just because it's the most popular doesn't mean it's the most authoritative, even though it's from a verified publisher.
Yeah, the Java one can be kind of dangerous too, because if you just do Docker pull Java, you're actually pulling an image that I think is actually even older than this one. If you do Docker pull open JDK, then you're pulling the right image, and that's the one that's kind of community supported. But I can imagine that a lot of people make that mistake, and I know Bashful Robots. So I checked out Flatcar. That's pretty cool. I didn't know about that image before, but it's about sort of high security and low maintenance. Looks like that company was acquired by Microsoft, which is interesting, just goes to show how much interest there is in this container space these days. But yeah, security is a big use case here, right? You want to know what's inside your images. And I think that's something, Martin, you and Brendan will be talking about a bunch in terms of, the software supply chain is what they call it. And, the ability to know what's inside your containers is, is getting really, really important to people these days. So.
Yeah. So I see some of you are clicking on the invite code. Well done. Congratulations, Ali. I'm glad to see that worked for you. If you've got a problem there, I know you're in our Discord already. You'll find links at the footer of this URL above my head for those of you that aren't in there. But we've got a product feedback category channel in our Discord, so if you do bump into any rough edges, let us know. We'll forward that on to our product and engineering team in order to iron out any issues you might encounter, although it looks like Ali's off to the races now, so that's good.
Yeah, Ali, if you need an invite, or if anybody needs an invite, just ping us in the Discord and we'll get that to you.
Yeah,
please let us know if you see any bugs for sure. So cool. There's little bird ones.
Okay. And in here as well, you will find some examples of those sort of more infrastructure pieces, apps and services that you can use as building blocks.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much wraps up, what we wanted to discuss here. For those of you that are looking to get started with containers, some considerations about where to start and what to use. Hopefully we've answered some of the questions that came up last time round. If we haven't, do join our discourse. We have one of those as well. I should point out, if you join Discord, if you just join Discord, you will be told where our discourse is, and that's actually hiding over at community.slim.ai. So you heard it here first, folks, because of that slip of the tongue. So feel free to sign up over there as well. When I return from vacation, we're going to be turning that up to 11. So if you want to get signed up early, you'll see a flurry of activity there in the coming days. But yeah, that's kind of the overview we wanted to present. And if we've missed anything or you've got more to say, then do head over to our Discord and send us your feedback or questions.
Yeah, perfect. So looking forward to hearing more of what you all are working on, and yeah, excited to check out this flat card thing. Dustin, let us know what you come up with there, and talk about it more on future streams about sort of the future of Docker. It seems like a lot of people are thinking about interesting stuff, different ways of kind of combining different pieces of the infrastructure and all of that. So. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time with Brendan. So until then, I'm at PSVan on Twitter.
I'm M_Wimpress on Twitter, and we are at SlimDevOps over on Twitter. So you can also send us your feedback there. Thank you very much, everyone, for stopping by. If you want to continue the conversation, we'll be in chat for a few minutes after, or our Discord. I'll also be hovering around there if you want to join there, and if you've got any follow-up for us. So thanks for coming, everyone, and we'll speak to you in 2 weeks' time, same place in 2 weeks.
Happy vacation, Martin. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Peter. Bye for now.